It's time for more Brawlers Guide Guilds. Guide Guilds. I'm dyslexic. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Gabesty here. It's time for more Brawlers Guild Guides, and this one is your first fight in rank 8 against Hexos, the eyeball fellow. Hexos is a seriously overly attached eyeball. I don't know what to do with him. He just comes over uninvited. He just clings to you like just in a creepy, really inappropriate way. Look at him. He just won't leave you alone. He's just, one of those touchy-feely types, even though when he touches you, it's kind of slimy and filmy. There's secretions coming out of his eyelids, and I don't know. Your friends don't like him, really. You never invite him over. I guess he just wonders why he doesn't have any friends, and you tell him subtly that this is why, but he never listens. So, he's kind of a scumbag like that. He needs some Visine treatment, and there's nothing you can do about it. So instead, we're going to kill him. So, to actually defeat Hexos, tactically or strategically, things are, in one sense, pretty simple. You rotate around and avoid the lasers, and you kill him. But, on the other hand, in a more actual or, quote, real sense, whatever that means, it's a real pain in the ass, and good luck, you'll want to kill his entire family. I don't even know, do eyeballs have families? I guess they have, like, a sibling, unless they're living in an ogre or something, and then they're asexual. They live alone, a solitary life. Whatever, I'm stupid. Anyway, Hexos, as you can see, will spawn these sort of laser light shows at you, which is very similar to a game called Super Hexagon. I think that's where the idea originated from. And the idea is that you need to rotate such that you're facing, and by extension, Hexos' current position, it never actually touches one of these laser pads that are coming towards you. So, the first thing I would suggest when practicing this is to make your camera zoomed far out and then look at yourself from a top-down view, as you can kind of see here I'm doing. This will allow you to easily gauge where the openings in any given pattern are coming from and then react accordingly. So the second tip would be to make sure you use your mouse to actually do the turning. So most people by default, if they hold the right mouse button down, they can then turn and, easily mouse look basically. So by combining a top-down view with mouse look, you can easily rotate, or theoretically easily rotate, to face those gaps as you need to do. So the third big tip would be to use sound alerts for your common abilities and cooldowns, procs, things like that. So obviously I don't know how everyone else is set up, but for my basic DPS rotation stuff, I use an add-on called Weakors, which you can see below my character, a lot of visual displays for that, so I know, when my cooldowns are available and my energy and all that good stuff. But on this fight, you're focusing so much on the visual aspects of your facing relative to the lasers and where you're going to turn next, that it's very difficult to take your eyes off that information for long enough to look at your DPS cooldowns and see what's happening next with your rotation. At least I found. So, take advantage of your other senses to help yourself out. In this case, if you can't use, visual cues, then use auditory ones. So I set up Weakors just for a few of my basic common DPS abilities so that I'd know when I could use them with a little chime noise or whatever it might be, and then I wouldn't have to actually look at my DPS visual alerts while I'm doing this fight. Essentially, I can just use the auditory signals for that. So that helps a lot. And probably the more the better, although obviously you don't want to add so much that you're just completely overwhelmed by the sounds and you don't really remember what means what. But certainly the one or two, maybe three most common abilities that you use that have cooldowns, you should add some indicator to that to know when they're happening. So the fourth tip is simply that survival does not matter in this fight. Focus everything you can on DPS abilities and damage. So obviously, in a sense, if you die, you lose the fight. So survival matters in that sense. But what I mean by this is that there's no damage in this fight other than if you get hit by a laser. And if you do get hit by a laser, it's 1.1 million damage baseline. So you're probably going to get one shot. Most people do. The only class I saw that was able to survive one hit of the laser was a warlock. And I don't know what ability that is, but basically they were down to nothing, and then they would die after that. So the point is, if you have abilities or talents or glyphs or whatnot that you would normally use on these Brawler Guild fights to increase your survivability or up your healing, whatnot, you can ignore those completely on this fight in favor of anything that increases your damage output. So for a monk, for example, as you see here, I'm using my tiger pet because, he's extra damage. And, normally I would use one of my primary heals, which is Chi Wave, to heal myself as well as do some damage. But in this case, the only time I actually use that ability is if I have a gap in my other damage abilities, because it doesn't cost any resources. But that's rarely the case here, so for the most part, I'm just casting my normal DPS stuff, and I don't have to worry about casting my heal abilities since there's no damage incoming. So focus on DPS, don't worry about heals or damage reductions. Now a few tips for dodging the lasers beyond what I've already said. The basic thing you'll find right away, at least I did, is that the opening sequence, when you first start this encounter, the first 5 seconds or so, is by far the most difficult to get down. The reason for this is simply that it's hard to get into the pattern and the mindset of it. You've been sitting there waiting 10 or 15 minutes in the queue, not really doing anything, and suddenly you're thrown and you have to immediately, transition into this rapid movement and analyzing the patterns and all that stuff. And it's really difficult to make that transition on a dime. And in addition to that, as you'll see here, if we start the fight over, the opening pattern, which is always the same, is a sequence of 2 180 turns. So there's a 180 and there's a 180. And as the opening pattern, that's very difficult to get used to. You have to do it very accurately right away. After that, things are a little bit calmer for a while until it gets crazy later on. So really concentrate on getting in position right away and repeating the same, ritual, if you will, when you start this encounter as you're practicing. So I always run to the center. I use my pre-potion. I get my camera in position, the same distance. I make sure my mouse is clear of any, hindrances. Make sure you have enough space to move your hand around with your mouse rapidly, so you're not going to run into, your keyboard or objects on your desk or anything like that. You just need a lot of free movement space so that you don't, get hindered by what you're trying to do. So the second tip would be make sure you don't turn too early. Now obviously the same applies to the opposite, don't turn too late, but turning too early is something that is less obvious that can catch you off guard if you're not careful. At least it was for me. Basically, because the lasers collapse onto your location, you need to make sure that they're completely dissipated from a particular angle before you turn to face that angle. If you look at the debuff that you gain from ocular stasis, if you mouse over it and read the tooltip, you'll notice that the laser damage is based on your facing. So many people will incorrectly say that's where the boss is located, and obviously the boss is attached to your front, so in a sense they're one and the same. But if you look at the footage, you can clearly see that the boss touches lasers pretty frequently. And, like his targeting reticle, that red circle under him, the edge of that touches lasers all the time. So because of that, and because the actual description on the debuff says that it's your facing that determines it, then just keep that in mind. It's not really where the boss is. You want to focus on where you're going to face and whether your facing is within a gap when you're looking in a particular direction. So this means that when you are trying to turn in rapid succession, it can be easy to clip an existing segment that hasn't quite collapsed on you. In these singular segments, it's not that difficult because you're moving rapidly, so there's only one segment on any given side that you have to avoid. But the thing I found is I would often clip the edge of segments when there are a lot of them, like right here, coming in from one angle. So the best thing you can do is just wait a little bit longer than you need to. Like this part here, make sure you're waiting for that entire sequence from one angle to your side to finish before you actually turn and rotate again. Otherwise, you'll clip the end of one and kill yourself. So just be careful of that. So the next thing to be aware of is that other than the opening sequence, which is always the same, after that it seems that the patterns and the sequences that you get are somewhat random in the order that they appear and how the laser segments come together. This is best illustrated with a clip from another attempt that I made earlier, where you can see here that the gap to escape this safely is so minuscule, and I'm not good enough to escape it. So here's the clip. It's at 30% of normal speed, and right there you can see, look at that tiny survival section. Obviously I didn't make it. It's just this little tiny gap. Here's again. So you can see all the lasers on the right, they're basically blocking all my exits. So there's just this little tiny section. I can go behind that entire segment or in this little sliver. So if we played at normal speed here, yeah, good luck. So really that's about all the tips I can offer. You really need to practice that movement, looking in the facings of those gaps rapidly and effectively without making mistakes, while maintaining your DPS. That's the most difficult part, is combining the two. Survival's easy, or doing your DPS rotation, of course, is easy, but at the same time, doing both is quite tricky. To defeat Hexos before the fire, you have to do 100,000 DPS sustained over the 2 minutes. So use that as sort of your gauge, depending on your gear and whatnot, to determine whether you'll be able to get this guy in a reasonable time frame. And yeah, other than that, just practice, practice, practice. It's unfortunate that he is the first boss of sort of this new section that many people will be facing. Oh, there's one minor tip I forgot about. You may have seen it halfway through the fight here. I noticed that my nameplate was still on. I turned that off, which is just a minor thing. Just it got in the way a little bit and helps me see more of the battlefield, essentially. So since you have no reason to see nameplates really, since it doesn't matter what your actual damage output is to him, if you don't have enough, then you'll lose. So you don't really need to see what his health is at or anything like that. And there's no other mobs to attack or target. So anything you could do to clear your visual field and give you as strong a sense of the laser pattern as possible will help you out here. And other than that, good luck. He's a real dickbag. And it took me quite a while to get him down. And in this clip, actually, this is the second time I killed him because I didn't get a recording the first time. So I don't get a Brawler's purse, but you'll see me doing fights later on. And that's Hexos. Good luck. Thanks for watching.